This is an interactive conversation, so instead of giving Gordon and Shamari a list of questions, we wanted to make sure that you help us shape the discussion based on what you're curious about. So please use the chat box to post your questions for the speakers all throughout the event, and we will do our best to infuse them into the program. And now it's time to welcome our speakers. Shamari Jones, Director of Equity and Engagement for Bellevue Schools, and Gordon McHenry Jr., the CEO and President of United Way of King County. Thank you both for being here, and I will turn it over to you, Gordon.
Thank you, Bo. Appreciate your being with us today. I appreciate your service on the United Way board and chairing our change makers. Really excited to be with all of you. Excited to be with a real social justice advocate, Shamari Jones, who I've known for just a minute or two, as in a couple decades. You know, it's virtual, but we're really wanting this to be a community, interactive. We want it to be a conversation around something that's really important, which is our educational sectors here in the United States, and particularly here in King County. At United Way, we're working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. We believe a quality education can be a pathway out of poverty, but poverty makes excelling really tough. And that's why United Way is providing support to students and their families from their earliest days before they enter school through post-secondary education, with a lot of attention in our two-year colleges. We're excited that we're having this conversation during Black History Month, a time when there's extra attention onto the reality of one important part of our community. This is rooted in racial equity as a path toward racial justice, and it's hard work. And I appreciate people like Bo and Shamari, who are part of today's panel, Sandra Madrid and Denise Stiffarm, two other board members at United Way who are present with us today. I get a lot of great support, and our team gets a lot of great support from people with incredible influence and wisdom. So let's start this conversation with the event theme of exploring how co-constructed, inclusive, and equitable educational environments can foster a sense of belonging and provide every student with the opportunity to thrive both in school and beyond. That's a deep sentence. It comes from the wisdom of Shamari. So I'm going to ask you, Shamari, to elaborate on that sense of belonging. And what does that mean to you personally? And what does it mean in the context of the educational sector?
Oh, man. Thanks, Gordon. Welcome, everyone. I'm super happy to be here. I'm excited to be in conversation about something that brings me joy, something I'm extremely passionate about. Happy and proud to represent and be a representative of the board of United Way. So sense of belonging, it is a term that has really sort of taken our education community by storm here in the past maybe 5 years or so. I know it's been around for some time, but we've really sort of put an emphasis on it in the past, half of a decade. I would say that when it first dropped, Gordon, I was not a fan. I was not about sense of belonging because it was a distraction from what we were really focusing on, which was racial equity. People felt really comfortable within the realm of this idea of belonging because it did not identify as something that was particularly earmarked or targeting race, and something that made people very uncomfortable. It brought about a discomfort for people being engaged in conversations around race, or having to engage or embark upon trainings or facilitated opportunity to discuss things that they were uncomfortable about, revolving that idea of race. And when belonging initially came along in my world, from my lens, within the respect of my work, belonging, people really gravitated to it alongside culturally responsive teaching and anything that eliminated the idea of the term race. And it took me some time to get to this idea and this concept that belonging was the thing. But now that I have taken and had a moment to really like invest in the concept and the idea and do some research and some trainings around it, there is a foundational component of belonging that is so vital and so important to ensure that when I walk into a space, whatever that space may be, that I do not have to already show up with a layer of armor on my body, protecting me for what I am going to incur as I prepare myself for the worst. Which is a lot of the experiences that some of our young people have when they walk into school building spaces. They know what that experience is going to be and what they're going to feel coming from some of their peers. And it is super unfortunate that they also know what some of the feelings are going to be that they're going to have coming from adults in some of these spaces. And they protect themselves and they don't feel a sense of belonging. And their parents didn't feel a sense of belonging prior to them. And so there's a legacy that they themselves might have of the entire family not feeling belonging and the entire family having this opposition to the school building house. And while we may see so many of our young people and their families putting up a hand to in resistance to the support that we want to ensure that they have and the success that we want them to experience in schooling.
That's really powerful, and I appreciate your candor about your journey to get to comfortable with an aspirational goal of belonging. But I think it really is important for this conversation to hold that aspirational goal that you described, and let's talk about race. So, Shamari, how does race show up in a school, and how does it impact students for like in the classroom, maybe in the curriculum? You know, what is the challenge that is present from your experience in working with young people when it comes to race in the educational system in sectors and environments?
I mean, it's almost too deep of a question to ask in the very short amount of time that we have. I was on a plane yesterday and I was trying to re-listen to the book Caste. You know, and if you haven't listened to or read the book Caste, and I haven't yet watched the movie Origin, and if you haven't watched or had an opportunity or even know anything about this movie Origin, put it on your list. It is a reflection from the book called Caste. But it really gives a depiction of like the origins of the concepts of race, and how we genuinely have predictability for which many of our students, unbeknownst to them and unbeknownst to those who are the perpetrator, for lack of a better term, excuse me for anyone who might take offense to that, the predictability that is bestowed upon someone due to simply the color of their skin and the background from which they hail. And when I walk into a space, there are folks who have a unknown, predictable understanding of what I believe your capabilities are, where I believe you belong in the rung of society, academically, socially, what I think your success metrics might be, where I think you are going to achieve, or what I think you might achieve in life in the long term. I mean, I have experienced, and I've been working in schools for a good amount of time now, 15 or so years. I've experienced, even in current decades, students still telling me that adults in their lives, whether it be counselors or teachers or administrators, advising them that college is not for you, or you're not going to be successful at that. And like that, it blows my mind that there are still adults who discourage people from a thing that they feel that is a part of their their dream. They have internalized that I know that I can do this. And there are still people who are in their pathway who, for whatever purpose, don't believe that they are capable. And in many experiences, there are power dynamics, racial dynamics, and other dynamics that sort of fall into the realm of the caste in which folks have been placed by a long-term system that no one who is here presently created. And it's a very difficult thing to dismantle.
Shamari, I appreciate that. And one of our participants acknowledges what you said about the legacy part about parents not feeling belonging. I've seen that personally, how it influences kids, like in what's communicated to kids, how our kids prepare for those spaces. You had mentioned about not having to put on armor. So when you're working with, because we talked about this in the pre-meeting, when you're working with students and their families, what strategies do you work with to help students and families not fall into that trap of I'm not worthy, I'm not as good as, and anticipating that and therefore constraining their dreams even at a very early age? Are there some strategies and tactics that you and antidotes that you're implementing in your work with students and families?
My hopes, if and when anyone seeks me out, there are times when I do have the benefit or the privilege to engage and work directly with young people and their families. Sometimes I try to seek folks out because I know that they're coming, and sometimes people may research and find folks who they feel comfortable with working in a space in which they're sending their children. And they will ring me up or send me an email and say, hey, like, we're coming to your space. I want to know everything, and what is safe for my children or safe for me as a parent. And my objective and my goal is to get them to spaces where they feel connected to others that give them that sense of belonging, which we just spoke about. Hopefully give them, and especially their children, a community where they feel embraced. In that opening video, Doug Baldwin said it was all about love, and it truly, there's just a foundation of someone walking into a space, and sometimes it takes a moment for people to feel this level of being acclimated, but like a community of feeling a sense of love, like I'm here. I know someone's got my back. Um, I don't believe, as an educator, I don't believe we should be focused on putting academics first. Like, how on earth can a young person perform academically if and when they show up to school and they're imbalanced for any purpose? They're imbalanced by way of I don't feel safe. I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel well for whatever that reason might be. It could be mental health reasons. It could be another illness. It could be I'm hungry, and I don't feel well. I can't focus. There are so many factors in front of young people that have to be mitigated for a student to feel like they are here and they're present and they're ready to learn alongside others. And I think it is important for me when I am engaging with a student and a parent that I put them in spaces where they are connected to others who will make sure that each and every one of those factors is taken care of as they step foot into the schoolhouse building for the first time.
One of our participants here noted that the race is not a biological, aspect or concept. It's a social construct. And so are you finding that is actually being taught or understood in the education system that we're talking about? We talk about race all the time, explicitly and implicitly, but it's a construct. It's not biology. Does that show up in current curriculum?
No, it doesn't. I don't think that there's enough clear understanding of that. And I think there is a a legacy and a history. You know, like the type of training that we do in schools, I think, is way too late. It's way too late. Like it's like it's a cover, almost like a mask for like, okay, you're now an adult and we have to give you something to help to sort of provide you with the necessary consciousness to understand that what we've been doing for the entirety of your youth, adolescence, all the way into adulthood was not um, 100% on point. Like, let's give you some foundations of understanding of how we begin the journey of healing individually. Each individual has to heal from a journey that they have been on that was not given to them in the entirety of their youth to adulthood. Our country has not been kind to us by not telling us the entire truth. And so most of our people who are adults now weren't giving information that they needed from pre-K to kindergarten, all the way through their teacher preparation programs, all the way into and through becoming administrators through their administration and professional preparation programs. And so what we tend to do as specialists in this work, particularly in school district settings, is we give like a power punch of deeply infused trainings in short amounts of time. It might be a 2-day infused with a subsequent series of days. And, you know, there of course are some people who are like, I'm cured, you know, I'm good, you know, I got a certificate, I'm ready. And then there, of course, there are those who are intrigued and want to have a deepening experience that helps them to go beyond and further, which is fantastic. But very, very seldom do I experience a wonderful sense of understanding to the degree that folks understand all the way back into, as I was explaining, that caste, you know, and the fact that this is, you know, a construct and that we're sort of doling this back out into the curriculum that we're offering to our students. Like, we haven't reached that level yet, and we really have to get there. And it is so very hard for us to transform what we're offering to our kids by way of what the state says that we must offer. Like, it's a delicate balance, and I need some help. And I think there are some people on this call who might be some of the right people to enlist to help to continue this conversation after this conversation, Gordon, to really start pushing back and helping to move the needle on how we infuse some of this into what it is that we offer our students, our over 1 million students in our state.
Yeah, yeah. And I appreciate your beginning early in this conversation with a call to action. I think it, you know, advocacy for individuals, advocacy for communities, advocacy to change systems is so critical in terms of race and social justice. And it is so much more impactful when you have support and you have, you know, you're not standing alone. You know that you're on righteous ground and there are people with you. So we'll come back to that. I have a good question. Every question is a good one, but this one, it says, when students walk into a space and they don't feel belonged, it can't be easy on them and their mental health. What strategies have you seen different school districts implementing to help students, you know, I think with their mental health and toward that path of belonging?
I haven't seen a lot of great strategies. I really appreciate that question. I don't know that there are a lot of districts who value. I'm going to roll back and I'm going to role play here. If I'm role playing and firmly sitting in the seat of a middle school, an 8th grade middle school student who does not feel a sense of belonging, and I'm a young Black male, and every single day I come into the school building space and I'm called the N-word, and it's deeply impacting my ability to focus and lean in on my academic studies. And my academics are declining. I'm going from being a pretty decent AB student to a much lesser aligned to my normal, maybe C, D student. And I go to someone and say, and maybe I can't articulate very well, Gordon, and person who wrote this question. I go to someone, an adult, and I say to them, I don't know why I am not doing so well any longer. I can't focus. I don't like that people are calling me names every single day. In my experience, I have not seen schools in any of the schools that I've worked in handle that extremely well. There are forms, there are processes, there are suspensions, there are restorative circles, there are all of these structures put in place that helps to eliminate that thing from happening. Nothing repairs what's happening with that student. Like no one says we need student for you to experience a healing yourself that looks like this, so you can overcome this internalization that you just had, and let that go, so you can get back to a space where you prefer or where you once were. I've not seen that before. And I love that question, and I'm going to be asking myself that question a lot more now. Thank you.
Great. Great. We have a couple questions that I think are rooted around or focused on the school to prison pipeline. But before we go there, I want to lift up a question that I think is very consistent with what you were just exploring. Just got to get back to it.
Wow, such amazing questions.
Oh,
I can't keep up with them.
We've got a good audience. We seem to be in a time where it is a bit more likely that we both understand and can name examples of racist and ableist practices and their impact on not only marginalized students, but also families, educators, and other stakeholders as we collaboratively work in partnership and in support of our mutual students. And I love our students. There seems still to be extreme difficulty in school and district communities statewide putting into practice prioritized support to combat the day-to-day impacts of treatment rooted in bias. For Shamari, what are your thoughts either within the district or state advocacy efforts to confront and support resistance?
Resistance by whom? By the
I think resistance, yeah, by the school and district communities actually operationalizing practices to combat bias and behavior that's rooted in bias. And so how do we advocate around that?
I mean, this is my 10 years worth of work. Oh my God, you just encapsulated 10 years worth of my work. How do I do this? Okay, this is stressful. It's very stressful. Okay, so here's the thing. It took a long time for me to come to this realization. It actually took someone to tell me this and point this out to me. Like, my job is not to change people. My job is not to change people, Gordon. My job is not to change people. I cannot work with you, Gordon, to the point where I am going to expect you to do or be different than Gordon McHenry Jr. I can't. What I can do and what I am charged with doing is offering you a perspective that is different than the perspective that you may have been given for the entirety of your life. And providing you with a multitude of narratives. And unfortunately, this has to happen in many instances, but like, measurements and statistics and real life scenarios, and sometimes, excuse my language, to the detriment of people, sometimes I have to give examples of like like individuals who have been impacted. And, you know, I can go down the line of ways that I have to provide people with information so that they can have what is necessary to change their lens and do different. And I might even add do better for those that we seek to serve, who deserve to be served better and differently. And there's no easy feat. And that's what our education system says that that we have to do. Like that's the way our systems are set up presently. You know, we work in government systems, and there are layers of policies and layers of RCWs and layers of WACs and layers of practices for which this is how this operates currently. And these are some of the things that have to change. Like, I don't know, like societally, that all people understand the barriers of transforming systems that are so deeply rooted in policy and practice as such. Like in the corporate world, we can stop the truck on a dime, make a pivotal shift, and go in a different direction. You know, we can do something similar in nonprofit, not in government. It's a little different. And so 10 years of this has been very challenging, but it's incremental changes that have sort of kept me afloat and seeing the opportunity to transform the individual experiences of those who've been put out in front of me and said that I need your support in helping to transform these experiences that I'm having.
I think there's a lot to reflect on there, just how challenging it is to change large institutions that are governmental or quasi-governmental, and to do it in a way that's actually meaningful to actually an ever-evolving, students and families. There is, of course, a real danger, an area of harm. I guess that's my editorializing, but an area of harm that is known as the school to prison pipeline. There's one question that says, what steps are educators taking to counter this? We have a person who asked also, what should students do, and I'll say students and family, do when they are the victims of restraint and isolation? So prison to school pipeline and actions inside the system that are show up as restraint and isolation. You have thoughts on those?
I think, we have all types of information that is metric driven as to the school to prison pipeline, particularly third grade reading, and like if you fail X amount of classes by this particular grade, you have this % more likelihood to ... you fill in the blank. And all these statistics, excuse me, I cannot combat. We have statistics that state that prisons are built in certain places based on reading levels at a particular grade level. And I believe all of these things to be true. And the thing that we do in districts, and I don't know how effective it is, I just know that we do it, is we measured it. We have state and government funding that comes to us to measure success rates at particular benchmarks. We test kids at specific levels, i.e. third grade reading, to see where we are. We have federal subsidies to ensure that reading levels are met, and if they're not met, we have enough resource to infuse individual people power into spaces where those reading levels are not met, to ensure that we raise those levels for those individual students and families. Does that help to reduce the school to prison pipeline numbers, that's the information I do not have. I would like some research around now that the state and the feds funnel money to our school districts specifically for these purposes, how we seen those numbers decline. I don't know. I would like to know because it's been some years now. They would get, specific amounts of money for Title I. It's just, our schools that have over a certain amount of families who are below the poverty line, 40% or higher. 40% of the families in that school building are below the poverty line. And then we get specific funding for students who need reading intervention. And so within those spaces, I'd like to know, have we done or made a dent, even just in Washington, with our pipeline? Because our numbers in Washington are egregiously disproportionate with regard to even our Black population of those who are Black, who identify as Black in our state, juxtaposed to those who identify as Black who are in our prisons. So if anyone's got that information, Gordon, I would love for them to shoot that to us so we can be able to even push that back out to folks in this call. Can you please help me with the second question again about restraint?
Oh, just how should students and families react or engage when they've been a victim of restraint and isolation? What action can they take?
I would think that we had gotten rid of those things by now. Like we used to have isolation places in school building spaces, and I don't know if anyone and I'm also assuming this is what this person is referring to. I'm assuming restraint means physical restraint. I'm assuming isolation means withdrawing a student from a space and putting them in an enclosed space, maybe because of their behavior. This is my assumption, so I'm gonna just orate that back. If my assumption is wrong, please correct me in the chat. I am not a fan. I do not approve of these practices. These practices are typically geared towards elementary kids. And elementary kids are all still in developmental phase. How on earth are you going to isolate? I mean, most of the times they deem our students who are being restrained or who are put in isolation spaces as dysregulated. That's oftentimes the term that is used, dysregulated. And sometimes the dysregulation is pretty high end. I mean, there are students who generally have instances of not being able to control some of the things and some of the emotions that they have, to the degree where in a classroom space, they may end up throwing tables and throwing chairs, and it becomes unsafe for them and unsafe for others. And there may have to be an instance where some professional who is, and hopefully there is an agreed upon professional agreed upon by the parent signing off on this, and the school, that professional has the permission to engage with that student in such a way. But this should be a conversation in advance. If that conversation has not been had in advance, then I think that parent alongside that student should file a complaint and do some investigation and ensure that before that ever happens again, that there are protocols for which the parent is engaged appropriately, or that there is an advanced list of criteria set forth for which my child is dealt with humanely before any action occurs with my child.
so it helps if I unmute myself. How do external partners, and this person says, I mean, it's all connected in the end, support the work so that it is understood that the work cannot live in one equity department, especially at the intersections of race and disability?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that question because a lot of times it does end up in one space, and for some places it ends up with one person. And back to my early narrative, I remember when I first started working in this sector, and I was the only person in the role. And I didn't even come from government. I came from nonprofit. And Gordon, I was just so cocky. Man, I started unbuttoning my shirt like I'm here, and we're gonna change everything. We're gonna change it all. I worked in a sector where I saw externally the challenges that students and their families experienced because I was one of those community partners. And I had the exact same question, like, how do I support pushing into the system in a way that I could be a catalyst for change? And that way our students and families wouldn't have to deal with what they're dealing with now. And so once I began to work on the inside, I realized that, oh man, this is such a heavy lift. All of that cockiness melted off of me really quickly. And I realized that this is not a one-man show. I was fortunate enough to be able to use resources to enlist other supports from within and hire on additional folks. But the real change for me came when I was able to enlist people who had no barriers, like people who did not have the ceiling that I had, people who did not wear the badge that I wore, people who did not receive the paycheck from the organization that I received a paycheck from, to people who did not have the parameters that I had. Those are the folks who are able to push in ways that I cannot push. And the only reason why I say I cannot is because inevitably someone gets to tell me no, and I have to say okay. Because at the end of the day, I don't make the final decision all the time. But from time to time, like I'll take a Post-it note and write something on it, and I'll slide it to the homie over here. I'll slide it to the homie over there. And I'll say, like, this is what we need though, for real. And they are able to go leaps and bounds beyond any barriers that I might be able to have. Sometimes it's his parents and families. Sometimes these are our community partners. I don't love to use our students because our students, I wish that our students didn't have to be the catalyst for their own change. I think student voice is brilliant and it is beyond powerful. And I think that they are our key stakeholder for certain. But like, I want our students to be free from having to lift their voice until absolutely necessary. So I try not to enlist them until I absolutely have to. But the convening of a multitude of resources for the greater good, all bound together in one collective towards one common goal, the collective impact of that is so profound and so powerful that's when the change occurs. Individually and on our own, it's the most difficult lift. It's like 100-pounder trying to lift 500 pounds, man. Like it's critical that we, and especially if you are a community partner, it's critical that if you're not being reached out to, please reach in. Sometimes your people are drowning and they need you to ask, like, how can I support? You know, what walls or barriers can I knock down for you?
Thank you. Great question and powerful answer. One person replied to some of this conversation that 92% of students who experience restraint and isolation in Washington schools have a diagnosed intellectual or development disability. Students of color with a disability are far more likely than their white peers to experience restraint and isolation when accounting for demographics. So not a question, but a comment that affirming the question and the concern.
Huge. Thank you for that statistic.
Yeah, I think it comes from one of our partners, one of United Way's partners in the educational work we do. Let's see, there was a question about, oh, here we go. A couple questions around the role of parents and families. And I want to make sure I get can you talk about the role of parents and families in fostering equity at school? And then there was one other one, not one other one, but how can individuals get involved and be allies and advocates for better DEI efforts in their school districts, particularly if you're not a parent? So parents getting involved and non-parents getting involved in this push for good treatment and eventual belonging. Any thoughts?
Yeah, parents, I think that parents in particular, like most recently, I launched an effort, like a family engagement effort in the school district. And there wasn't a uniform effort. And in many instances, there isn't a uniform effort in school systems for which families are put forward as deeply important in the process of their children's learning experience. And I want parents to understand the importance of your role. I mean, you already know this. You know that you're important in the role of the children, but I don't think that you may be as aware of how much districts don't understand your importance in the role of your children's experience. And so back to my answer, Gordon, in the last question, whereas I said it is vital for our stakeholders outside of our employees to truly sort of take flight and push beyond what some of our internal staff are capable of doing. If there is no movement that exists for our parents to experience barrier removal or to ensure that your voice is being heard, I would love for you, the parent, to ignite that. I do not believe that that is always the PTSA. I also do not believe that always the PTSA is a space where all folks feel a sense of belonging. And so if that is you and you feel that maybe not this organization that has been well established for a very long period of time, if I don't feel like that is the space where I belong because it's already there, then maybe there's a different space that we or you can construct. I can help you construct this and easily give you some feedback as to how I offered or helped construct other movements as such in different spaces that really just gave parents a platform. And it could be a district-wide movement or it could be a school building-wide movement. And who's going to deny you? I mean, you are the parents of the students. You are the stakeholder for the district and for those buildings. And I think it is vital that you are made aware transparently of things that are happening for your kids and with your kids. And I think that it is vital that you have a voice as to how we move the needle forward on things that we want to do to transform systems that support your kids. Same thing occurs for those who don't have kids. I think that there is a position for allyship, whereas you are supporting parents, but also supporting folks like myself who are seeking to make change in these systems. For you not having children in the system, it makes it a little bit more difficult for you to find an inroads to I need to have these meetings or I need to engage in these ways with the system. But how do you participate in ways with existing groups who do have those inroads and who do already have those established or well-built movements to offer your expertise? You know, we call them the 3 T's: the time, the talent, and the treasures. You know, to offer your 3 T's so that those movements can relieve themselves from so much pressure of having to do it on their own. Like there's always a need for additional people, and they need you.
You went to where at least I think several people in the audience are reflecting. Given this work is physically and emotionally stressful and tends to result in only incremental change or sometimes no change, what would be helpful from us on the outside to support you and your colleagues? So I think you may have addressed some of that if you have more things you'd like us to be reflecting upon, but I just want you to know that the folks are appreciating you and your colleagues who do this hard work and want you to be supported.
Yeah, I think individually, like I think that there is such a depth of need for every listener to embark upon an individual journey. I think there are so many of us who are eager to reach out and provide a supporting hand, which we need also. Like, don't hear me like I don't want that as well. But alongside that, um, we all have some deepening and much greater amounts of consciousness and growth to attain. Um, and I told you in the earlier part of this conversation, I was just listening to a book on my flight on my way here yesterday and like recapping some things that I needed to be reminded about. And a little bit was in preparation for this conversation today, but I didn't even know that till I start listening to it.
Right.
And I just think that number one, foremost, like, we have to be perpetual learners in this arena. What is the one or two things that you will do to keep yourself in the game, to stay fresh? There is a movement, there is a counter movement that is seeking to send us back to civil rights era, back before that. I mean, you watch the news, you see what's happening with book bans, you see what's happening. I had a friend who was trying to purchase some literature in Target in Florida and took the books to the checkout counter. And as she scanned them on the self-check thing, it said not for sale. And so she had to call the manager over, and the manager was like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. We can't actually sell these books. These were not meant to be out. I'm sorry, we have to take them back from you." I mean, like with the counter movement in play, I really feel like it's your responsibility to understand and to know um, what's going on in the world, but how to prepare yourself in ways where you're increasing your knowledge base, your understanding, and your consciousness so that you can be the best helping hand, you know, so that when I call you up, you know, to ride by me side by side, that you're well prepared when we are like in this fight together, when we are co-constructing, you know, way back to Gordon's very initial comment about the phrase of the title of our session today. We're co-constructing this journey together. Like I want you to have, you know, your best, most educated self at the table around this particular subject matter.
Thank you so much. In the chat, I let folks know we're just about done with the questions portion of our conversation, but are there takeaways that they are discerning? And one was, as Shamari said, quote, "I wish students didn't have to be catalysts for their own change. It's up to all of us, parents, non-parents, community partners, schools, coming together to make a collective impact." And folks are acknowledging that. Another person said, "We need more research on the effectiveness of reading programs and touch points to determine their effectiveness on the school to prison pipeline. Creating change requires connections to other colleagues and professionals to overcome barriers." Another person said, "This is all a reminder to be a better advocate for my teacher and parent friends, a better ear, a better donor to their school funds, a better voter," yes, "a better reader to know what's going on." A better reader to know what's going on in school these days. Another one is, "We have a lot of learning to do related to the intersections of race and disability and other intersections." And then makes reference to Khalid's comment above, who had this, you'll see that in the chat if you haven't already seen it. "Very much appreciate our community partners joining us and growing our understanding." And if folks have other takeaways, if I've please go ahead and drop those in. Shamari, any reaction to just giving you a little bit of hope and re-nourishing your resilience bank, that there are folks out here who are reflecting on the challenges and offering to increase their engagement?
I mean, the questions alone, you all ask really great questions. You all are often are awesome and obviously deeply engaged. And I love curious learners. The fact that you had these levels of questions means that to me that there's a likelihood that you want to do something about it. And so I have no doubt that you all will help us to transform our systems. My further hope is that you take this conversation that you heard today and you tell someone else about it, that you have a debrief about this conversation with another person. You take your wondering or your query or your learning and you discuss it. You know, you discuss it with a partner, you discuss it with a friend, you discuss it with a child, and you grow your perspective from that other person's point of view or perspective. And then maybe collectively you add a third, you know, and you just keep the ball rolling. This is how we generate a movement, you know, from one person at a time, keeping the conversation moving in a forward momentum. And I think that we can collectively, maybe in separate places now, but as we come back around, we can do some beautiful work together as Gordon brings us back together on the United Way front in the future. And so I'm excited about the opportunity.
I appreciate that. I appreciate, like you, Shamari, the curiosity, the desire to drive change. We host these conversations to inform folks based upon what we're experiencing in the community. We hope it's inspiring. There's some ways in which you can get involved, and I think our team will put a slide up. There are programs that United Way is actively involved in. And so if you've been moved and inspired by what you've heard today, hope you'll consider making a gift to support United Way's youth and education programs like Racial Equity Coalition, our Bridge to Finish. One thing I want you to make sure you understand is that whenever I talk about United Way, I'm talking about a community of folks. It's United Way, the organization, and our many community partners who are nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations. We are centering our work around those who are most marginalized, and that's at the intersection of race, ethnicity, and income. And so if that's this work that you find inspiring and important, please do I invite you to support us with some of your, not just your time, some of your treasure, in addition to your talent. Make your voice heard. There is, you know, a legislative session that is still continuing. We have a lot of bills that we're working on, but one is Senate Bill 5850. It's making its way through the Senate and the House. It's about barrier reduction for students who are participating in the Open Doors re-engagement programs. But there are a lot of areas that you can put pressure on in terms of having an educational system that is much more equitable and inclusive. We also have more events. Our next event, I think, is on March 23rd, and you'll get a chance to advocate for student basic needs. There it is, March 23rd, Volunteer and Learn, post-secondary basic needs. If you go to our website, under events, you will find a lot of things we're doing in the community, and we lift up our community partners and their work. So I just want to say thank you so much to Shamari Jones, a friend and a true social justice advocate. Greatly appreciate you. Thank all of the folks who took time today to join this conversation and give us thoughts, and your input matters. Please stay connected with us. If we do well, let us know. If we miss a step, I want you to let us know as well. And working hard, I think we can get to a future where true belonging exists for everyone in our community. Thanks very much. Take good care. Oh, there'll be a survey, so please take time to fill out the survey. It's not a lot, but that we use that survey to help design our events. So thank you so much, all. Appreciate you. Thanks, Shamari.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Gordon.